The elements of a firm's business continuity plan are flexible. They are to be tailored to the size and needs of a member. So it's not, here's 50 things that the plan must do. There are minimum requirements, yes, but the business continuity plan is very flexible. Things change over time. Businesses grow, shrink, locations change. The least that the plan must address: data backup and recovery, hard copy and electronic, all mission critical systems, financial and operational assessments, alternate communications between customers and the members, alternate communications between the member and its employees, and alternate physical location for the employees, critical business constituent bank and counterparty impact, regulatory reporting, communication with regulators, and how the member will assure customers prompt access to their funds and securities in the event that the member determines it is unable to continue its business. So that's the least that it can include, but remember, it's not a fixed plan, it's a flexible plan. If the minimum items are not included, the member firm would want to document why it excluded one of the minimum requirements. So we know the plan's in writing. We know it must be reviewed annually. It is a requirement that all members designate a member of senior management to approve the plan, and it's this person that is responsible for conducting the required annual review. So a person must be appointed over the plan. One person must be appointed to approve and conduct the review of the plan. Now, this is just not any one person. This one person must be two things: a member of the firm's senior management and a registered principal. And a registered principal. So you could be one of these people once you have your Series 26, as long as you're a member of senior management and you're a registered principal. So it's this person who is responsible for approving the plan and conducting the required annual review. There are specific customer disclosures required under FINRA Rule 4370 as well. Firms must disclose to their customers how the business continuity plan addresses the possibility of a future significant business disruption and how the member plans to respond to events of varying scope. At a minimum, the disclosure must be made in writing to the customer at account opening, posted on the member's website, and mailed to customers upon request. So the disclosures required under the business continuity plan: sent to customer upon request, on the website if the firm has a website, and what firm does not have a website these days? That would be a very odd firm that wouldn't be in business very long, that's for sure. In writing to customers at account opening. So that's really the first half of the rule, the business continuity plan. The second half of FINRA Rule 4370 has to do with emergency contact information of the member firm. All broker-dealer firms are required to have 2 emergency contact persons. All firms are required to have 2 emergency contact persons. Members are required to report these persons electronically to FINRA. Of the 2 emergency contract persons, at least one of them must be both a member of the firm's senior management and a registered principal. So that's similar to the person who could be named to approve the business continuity plan and the person responsible for the annual review. So of the two, one must be a member of senior management and a registered principal. So that could be you if you're a member of senior management. The second emergency contact person may be a registered principal or may not, does not need to be a member of the firm's senior management. If they are a registered principal, then that's great, but if they're not a registered principal, the second emergency contact person has to be a registered representative and associated person, yes, cannot be a clerical staff member. The second contact person must, if they're not a registered principal, must be a member of senior management who has knowledge of the member's business operations. So the emergency contact people are always registered reps. If this second, if not a principal, must be a member of senior management. With knowledge of the member firm's business. Now, it's possible that broker-dealers have only one registered representative. The registered rep's also a registered principal. So what happens then? Does that mean they just can't comply with FINRA Rule 4370? If it is the case that a member firm has only one registered person, they are allowed to designate the second emergency contact as an individual, whether or not they're registered or non-registered. So they can be registered with another firm or non-registered, so long as they have knowledge of the member's business operations. So if the broker-dealer had only one registered person, then that registered person would be the emergency contact person. And this is the only time it would be okay to name someone like the member's attorney or accountant as the second emergency contact person. In that case, they're not a registered rep, and that's okay. But the general rule is all emergency contact people must be registered representatives. Members must update their emergency contact information electronically in the event of any material change. And that brings in another rule. So we go from FINRA Rule 4370 to NASD Rule 1160. NASD Rule 1160 requires that firms update emergency contact information promptly, but in no event later than 30 days following any change. So emergency contact information updated promptly if it should change. And this is under NASD 1160. NASD Rule 1160 also requires that member firms review and update, if necessary, the contact information electronically on an annual basis, every calendar year, within 17 business days after the end of every calendar year. So annually, firms review and update, if necessary, contact information. within 17 business days of the end of the calendar year. Also under NASD Rule 1160. Firms are also required to comply with any request for contact information promptly. They're given 15 days to respond. So if a member firm is asked by FINRA for contact information, they should respond promptly, but they're given 15 days. Lots of dates in there to know. So requests for contact information, must be responded to promptly, but we have 15 days. 17 business days to annually review and update contact information electronically if necessary. Bob Smith was your emergency contact person. He's left the firm. You name a new emergency contact person, you should update that right away, although the rule really does give you 30 days. So make a chart, do something so that you don't forget those numbers. Being a principal's exam, it's a lot of law. It's making sure you know what the laws are to make sure your firm is following what the laws are. FINRA Rule 4524 has to do with supplemental focus information. So we've already discussed a broker-dealer's requirements to file focus reports, financial and operational combined uniform single reports. And when they're filed and how often they're filed is all determined by what kind of broker-dealer firm it is. FINRA does require now, in a relatively recent rule update, that there is more information that is required to be filed. And really what FINRA Rule 4524 says is that it allows FINRA to require the filing of additional financial and operational schedules as deemed necessary and appropriate for customer protection. And they do that now. So they require, in addition to the focus reports, beginning the third quarter of 2012, they require what are called supplemental statements of income. Supplemental statements of income. So I would know these are in addition to focus reports. They're filed electronically. Supplemental statements of income. So it's a supplement to the statement of income or loss page of the focus report. It contains additional line items that have a more detailed categorization of the revenue and expenses found in the statement of income. It allows FINRA to have a better understanding of a firm's revenue sources and expenses on an ongoing basis. I would know that all firms are required to file the supplemental statement of income within 20 business days of the end of each calendar quarter. Within 20 business days of the end of each quarter. So it's a quarterly form. It's done through the eFocus system. So supplemental statement of income, new report. FINRA Rule 8110 has to do with the availability of the FINRA manual to customers. Members are required to make available a current copy of the FINRA manual for examination by customers upon request. Back in the day, there was an actual manual. It was an NASD manual because back then, we didn't have all this electronics today, like we have today. Members are allowed to comply with this requirement to make the FINRA manual available for examination by customers upon request by maintaining electronic access to the FINRA manual and providing customers with such access upon request. And that's fine. It's all available online today if you went to the finra.org website. We already talked about NASD Rule 1160. That has to do with the contact information and reviewing it every year within 17 business days after the end of each calendar quarter. And anytime the contact information changes, you should update it when? Promptly. How long do you have? 30 days, 30 days. So we already talked about that within the FINRA Rule 4370. It referenced NASD Rule 1160. So we know that one already. NASD Interpretive Material 3010-1, Standards for Reasonable Review. In making sure that a member firm fulfills the supervision rule requirements, each member must conduct a review at least annually of the business in which it engages. The review must be reasonably designed to assist in detecting and preventing violations of and achieving compliance with applicable securities laws and regulations and with NASD, which are now mostly FINRA rules. So, reasonable review. Reasonable review to ensure compliance with supervision requirements, mostly. Sure, it's, overall rules, yes. Must be done how often? What's this rule? How often? Annually. A minimum of annually. The member shall establish and maintain supervisory procedures that must take into consideration, among other things, the firm's size, organizational structure, scope of business activities, number and location of offices, the nature and complexity of products and services offered, the volume of business, the number of associated persons assigned to a location, whether a location has a principal on site, whether the office is a non-branch location, the disciplinary history of registered reps or associated persons. So really what this IM was designed to do was to remind firms that the least that they can review compliance with the rules is annually. But it's very important to review the quality of supervision that is occurring at remote offices to make sure that there is compliance with applicable securities laws. With respect to a non-branch location, where a registered representative engages in securities activities, a member must be especially diligent in establishing procedures and conducting reasonable reviews. So it's possible that the reasonable review for a certain location is more frequent than it is for other locations. So at minimum of annually, but it's possible that it might be necessary more frequently. And it's basically this reminder that, hey, there's non-branch locations too, and you should supervise those as well. Because when there's not that there isn't supervision, but there's not direct supervision, there's no principal at those offices. So be extra diligent with those non-branch locations. Under the heading Office Inspections, Books and Records, within critical function number 3, we have FINRA Rule 7440. And it's a big one. It has to do with the recording of order information. And I'm not going to read you the whole rule because that would be boring. I need you to make sure you've always read the PDF before I talk to you, and I know I read a lot of these, but I'm not going to read this one because it's so long. I will, of course, talk about the most important parts, but make sure you've read the whole thing in its entirety. So, recording of order information. What is this about? Recording of order information. I'll talk about oats in just a minute. So under this rule, each reporting member shall immediately following receipt of an order record specific items of information. So immediately following receipt of an order, immediately following receipt or origination, I want to make sure to add that. Immediately following the transmission of an order, record specific items of information. So it's really the specific items of information that I'm going to make you study on your own. I'll do a few of them, but not all of them. Immediately following the transmission of an order, immediately following the modification, cancellation, or execution of an order, the reporting member must record specific items of information. So following modification, cancellation, or execution of an order, which I know I'm out of room, sorry. So recording of order information. This idea that there needs to be a trail. I almost said a paper trail. It is, I suppose, in the sense that it's not really paper anymore. It's all done electronically. So all of this information that we're going to talk about, all of this, that I'll tell you to read most of it, but this, the requirements of recorded information under this FINRA rule are all entered into what's called the OATS system. It stands for Order Audit Trail System. OATS was established by FINRA as an integrated audit trail. It includes order, quote, and trade information for all NMS, stocks, and over-the-counter equity securities. It provides a comprehensive information regarding orders and transactions that is critical to the FINRA staff so that they can conduct surveillance and investigation of member firms for potential violations of FINRA rules and federal securities laws. So the information that is recorded, when is it recorded? Immediately, whether or not it's receipt or origination, transmission, or modification, cancellation, or execution. It's all entered into the order audit trail system. Now, you need to know that there is, for these things, when they're done, there is a record of the time of the event. So we must always record the time. So member firms are required to record the time. And the format that they must use to record the time is very specific. Hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds if the member system captures time in milliseconds, which most of them do today, and in a couple of years from now, all of them will. So I would know hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. So it sometimes looks like this: hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. Hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. One more. Now, we said that this information that we're going to sort of talk about and you're going to read is required to be recorded immediately, no later than by the end of each business day. no later than by the end of each business day. When the order is received or executed at a member firm's trading department, each reporting member shall record an identification of each registered person who receives the order directly from a customer, each registered person who executes the order, and the department that originated the order if the order is originated by the member and transmitted manually to another department. Member firms are required to maintain and preserve records. So under this FINRA Rule 7440, reporting members are required to maintain and preserve this information for 3 years from the date of the record, 2 years readily accessible. So 3 years, record retention, 3 years, 2 years readily accessible. Readily accessible. A little bit about the first item, the immediately following the receipt or origination of an order. The order origination or receipt time is the time the order is received from the customer. I would know that. The order origination or receipt time is the time the order is received from the customer. Additional information that must be recorded other than the time the order was received is extensive. So read that over. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. It's things like number of shares, buy or sell, stop or limit, short sale, things like that. Make sure to read that. Order, origination, and receipt. We have a very specific list of information that you will review. Items to be recorded immediately when an order is transmitted. So we talked about that. So that was the second requirement. Don't memorize these, just have a basic understanding with them. There's so much under this rule. It is actually quite shocking. So it's really, I want to say the programmers who are going to make sure that your firm records the right information and submits it to OATS no later than by the end of every business day. We also have a list as far as the information to be recorded, the third requirement, immediately whenever an order is modified, canceled, or executed, no later than by the end of every business day. So make sure that you read over those lists, because I'm not going to bore you by reading those. NASD Rule 3110I is the mail hold rule. Upon written instructions from a customer, a broker-dealer is allowed to hold mail for a customer who will not be at his or her usual address. So we oftentimes refer to this as the mail hold rule. So firms may hold the mail if the customer is traveling within the U.S. for 2 months, and if the customer is traveling internationally, or they'll say abroad, then we can hold the customer's mail for 3 months. It is a weird sort of rule because a lot of times we don't think about the broker-dealer holding mail, but nonetheless, if it's on the outline, we're going to know the rule. Internationally, the broker-dealer can hold the customer's mail for 3 months. Under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, we have Section 17A1 that has to do with records and reports. Every broker-dealer who transacts business in securities shall make and keep records, disseminate reports to the SEC if required. They are required to do whatever the securities laws require as far as books and records. That's basically what 17A1 is talking about. So records and reports that are required under federal securities laws, records and reports that are required under any SRO that they are a member of. They're required to keep those records. Under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, we have Rule 15b 2-2, which has to do with the inspection of newly registered broker-dealers. Now, we know FINRA is the self-regulatory organization for the securities industry here in the U.S. So, FINRA has a requirement for inspecting all newly registered BDs. And they're going to inspect them anytime there's a new broker-dealer registered with the SEC. There's two different things that they're going to do. Within 6 months of registration with the SEC, they're going to inspect the firm to ensure compliance with financial responsibility rules. Within 6 months of registration, to ensure compliance with financial responsibility rules. So FINRA conducts this examination. It's also true within 12 months of the initial registration, so for this new firm, they're going to conduct an investigation to ensure compliance with all federal securities laws. So the first thing they're checking on is financial responsibility rules within 6 months. Then within 12 months, FINRA will conduct a broader examination.